Hello, everybody. Winging It is a show by Oddbird about web design, development, and our approach to solving problems. Today, Miriam and I are joined by Luke Warlow to learn all about Invokers, a new web feature that can make interaction much more declarative. Let's quick start with introductions. I'm James Stuckey Weber. I'm a developer at Oddbird. Luke Warlow is a web platform engineer at Igalia. Can you say a little bit about yourself and a bit about what you're working on? You're muted. Sorry. You're still muted.
There's always one thing I forget. Hi, I'm Luke Warlow. I work on the web platform team at Igalia. I've been there since December 2023, so I've been there a little over a year now. And yeah, I work on a variety of things on the web platform.
Great. And Miriam.
Yeah, I'm Miriam. I'm one of the founders of Oddbird and winging it.
Wonderful. That's the whole point today. So I think we'll start with just a quick introduction. We're talking about Invoker, the new Invoker API, which, Luke, you're one of the people who's been instrumental in making that happen and speccing that out, and I think doing some of the implementation work on that as well, I think. So yeah, first of all, let's convince Mia why we should use them. What are they and why should we use them? I'm convinced.
Yeah, so I think the TLDR is 2 new attributes that you can add to buttons that can do various things on the web. So one of them is opening, closing, toggling popovers, which we do already have attributes for, and we'll come back to that in a bit. And the other new functionality we have is to be able to open and close modal dialogues with no JavaScript. And those are the two things we've got at the moment, plus a third thing. Again, we'll come back to that. But the main idea here is popover came along. We had these new attributes, popover target and popover target action that we added to buttons. And unfortunately, just a bit too late, someone came along and was like, hey, wow, what if we had a similar thing, but for dialogue? And as it turns out, making a new attribute just for dialogue, and then we've already got the ones for popover, you start thinking, well, maybe we want to do other things with these, and you don't want to add a bunch of new attributes each time you think of something new. So it's gone through a few iterations. It's now the attributes of command and command for, and that's how you say, here's the thing I want to do, and here's the element I want to do it to.
That sounds very cool. I always want to more easily wire up my, and I've sort of so far created custom elements that wrap buttons and add that, but that sounds even better. I'm convinced. Do we call it here or?
I think we were done. No, let's jump into some examples. While I share my screen, I have a CodePen collection here, and I'll put up individual CodePens as we go through. If you want to follow along and work through these as well, that would be great. So let's see. So the first thing we're going to do is, this was inspired by Popover. I thought it would be a reasonable thing to just walk through. We have a Popover, we're using the Popover API. These buttons, super simple. The three options: you can show a popover, you can hide a popover, you can toggle a popover. And all of that is already done declaratively here with popover target and popover target action with show, hide, and toggle. And so what do we need to do to make this the new fancy invokers?
Yeah, so each of these attributes kind of have a pairing with the new system. So popover target is now command for, and that will take a ID reference like many other things. And then the other thing that you would do is change the popover target action to command. Now that on its own won't quite work because show is a bit general. We no longer know this is popover, so it's show hyphen popover, and it's the same for hide and toggle.
Okay.
And the naming there really comes from the JavaScript functions. So you have a show popover, you have a hide popover, and you have a toggle popover function. And the idea is the commands kind of pair up with those.
So we made those changes, and we're showing a popover, hiding a popover, and toggling a popover with the new command and command 4. That's great. That's simple. Are you under the hood just calling show popover and hide popover, or
Essentially, yeah. It depends. Spec wise, essentially, yeah. There's a show the popover algorithm that we call, and it gets called from the JavaScript, and it gets called from popover target and the command kind of handling. So there's an algorithm in a button that's like, I've been clicked. What do I do? And based on a variety of things, we go down different code paths. But yeah, it is essentially calling the function. And something that is slightly newer and isn't in all the browsers yet is show popover and toggle popover actually take a source parameter. So you can say the element that actually did the invoking as such, you can pass that through. But that gets handled for you because it's declarative. So we assign that.
okay.
And that's actually some of the things. So some of the reasons why we have command for rather than just have an on click and call popover.show. It does stuff such as setting up a implicit anchor positioning. So if you are positioning your popover relative to the button, you can do that slightly easier. You don't need to define an anchor name and reference it. It is just effectively the default anchor, and that works. Again, that works the same for command, and it works the same for popover. And likewise, if you do the JavaScript APIs and you pass the source parameter through, you get that behavior as well. And that's particularly nice because that works across shadow roots.
Oh.
So that's one of the tricky things currently. If you're doing anchor positioning and you're trying to cross shadow roots, it doesn't work necessarily. You have to do some special wiring to make that happen. But if you set this up in a certain way, then it will work across shadow roots. Yeah,
That's pretty cool. Yeah, this is great. This is all the CSS here. Just on the popover, I added position area end, and then it opens on the one that I clicked. So yeah, there's that source, or that implicit anchor being added there. Yeah. And you're also saying that if you show popover with JavaScript, you can pass that source in, and then that it'll set up that implicit anchor as well.
Yeah, exactly. So in Chromium, if you do show popover and then you pass it an object, if I'm remembering correctly, I think you pass it for an object, and that object takes a source property, and then that will be the element that you're trying to link it to, and that element can be inside of a shadow root or wherever you want, and it will work correctly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's one of the newer things that have been added. So popover, initially we created it, or others created it, and then with anchor positioning, it's like, well, it's quite common that you do want that linking there. And there were a few proposals, but one of the things that seemed to work quite nicely was just, hey, I'm opening this popover. It's fairly likely that I'm probably going to be the anchor target. So it will just by default go there. But you can do the usual anchor positioning stuff to anchor it somewhere else, and that worked fine.
So setting a different anchor just overrides the default.
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah.
This is very cool. I mean, I feel like I'm just sitting here mouth agape. Like, this is how I would want it to work. It's beautiful.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
really like when things become this declarative, and yeah, nice work.
yeah.
What else can it do?
Well, similarly, there's dialogue. This is not hooked up at all yet, but so right now we just have a button that says show the modal, and there's a dialogue that is with a close button inside. So I'm curious, what do we need to do to open this modal and then close it? I assume we need to do command for set that up, and then
Yep.
and then,
The command similarly is show -modal.
Okay.
Again, it's similar to the function. You call show modal, and then that will open it. And then to make the close button work, you do the same thing, but the command is close instead of show. And again, it's the same name as the function. We've tried to keep them pairings as obvious as possible. If there's a function, we'll and this goes for the future things that we add. If there's a function that exists, we'll try and name it after that function, because it's the easiest in terms of discoverability.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So the key things here is this works without JavaScript, which is obviously nice to have. But it also takes some of the thinking out of making sure that you get the accessibility correct. So for popover, it will handle ARIA details and the ARIA expanded state for you. So you don't have to wire that stuff up. And kind of similarly for dialogue, you don't have to wire that stuff up. And as it turns out, for modal dialogues, the browser doesn't need to wire that stuff up for you. There's various reasons for that. For example, if you've got a close button inside of a modal dialogue, you know from context, I'm in a dialogue, here is a close button, I know what it's going to do. I know the dialogue is open, so I don't need it to say expanded true. And likewise with show modal, you probably don't need it to say, hey, the thing's not open, because, well, it says it's not open.
And focus is automatically moved there, and the page is inert. So
yeah, exactly. So you fire show modal and it automatically does that stuff for you. But it takes that kind of thinking out of it.
For the close, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the idea is you don't have to think through some of this stuff yourself. Obviously, we're not doing everything for you. There may be situations where you do still need ARIA, but we've tried to come up with good defaults that make it a bit easier for you.
For the close button, how does this approach the command in command for compare to using the form method equals dialog? Is that what the other approach is? Because that's already sort of a declarative way of getting the close button, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a way with close that you could do it previously. If you put a form in there with a method of dialog, you could make effectively the submit button go ahead and close the dialog. So yeah, this is just an alternative approach. Not all dialogues have forms in. It may be that you do just have like an informational dialogue. It says some content. You just want to go ahead and close that. And you could previously do it through form, and this is just kind of maybe a slightly neater markup that you can do, and you don't need to wrap all your content inside of a form.
I am wondering, why is the close button, why do we need to say command 4 if it's inside of that? Is that...
Yeah. So that did come up during the design. So for popover, you don't actually need to say the action. If you just do popover target and you don't do popover target action, it will default to toggle. And the original, or one of the original design ideas here was at the time it was invoke target and invoke action. You could just do invoke target and it would have this idea of like an auto action. So for popover, it would be toggle. For dialogue, it would be show modal or it would be close. And the same applied for a few of the other ideas. And for a variety of reasons, we came to the conclusion that it's probably better not to have these implicit actions. It makes both author understanding slightly more confusing, and it also means that the browsers have to make this decision of like, what should the auto action be? And from there, then you get the accessibility aspect. So it's a bit easier if you just codify both of them. And likewise with the target, in that kind of case where you've got like a dialogue with a close button, it's fairly obvious. But when we were thinking through it, it seemed that actually there's a few cases where it's not necessarily clear. And this is something that we may be able to relax in future. Because we've been fairly strict on requiring both of them now, it may be that in future we can come up with, actually in this scenario, it is fairly obvious and we can kind of do that. But yeah, the thinking was if you do the button activation and then you have to like walk up the tree to see, am I in a dialogue and this sort of stuff, it's more complicated to do it that way.
No, I'm the one who is muted. The other part of dialogue, I'm curious. Return value is not part of this of the Invoker API, but I'm actually not sure that I've. Well, I don't know. I don't think I've used it, and I'm curious. How long has return value been part of dialogue? Is that a fairly newish part as well?
So I think that's always been part of it, and that's actually from the form method dialogue aspect.
Okay.
If you have a submit button in that form, I think this is testing my knowledge, but I think if the button has a value attribute, then that value is set to dialogue's return value.
Okay.
And actually, to come back to this, it is part of command invokers. If you
Okay.
have a dialogue close command and you add a value attribute to your button, that actually gets set to the dialogue's return value.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for instance, here, if we pick the Corvid, here's my bird example. Since we're odd bird and Luke is a fellow birder. So yeah, if you here we have the button where the command is close, where the command for is my dialogue, and then we have a value on those buttons. So just the same value there. So rook, and I have some JavaScript that puts out if there is a return value, prints that. Otherwise, something else. So yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, there we're getting into the we're getting a little bit out of the declarative world and into JavaScript, where we're adding an event listener on that dialogue. So saying when this dialogue closes, we're going to do something with that return value. I think that I can see some patterns where this would be useful for if there's a form inside, especially close or cancel versus submit would probably be the most common use case I can see there. But it might be, I don't know. Are there other common use cases that you see with return value?
So it's not an API I'm actually super familiar with.
Okay.
I've never used it myself. I've used dialogue previously, and I've never actually ended up using return value. I think it's useful, especially if you've got if you think of the old JavaScript alert, confirm, prompt, those sorts of JavaScript kind of APIs, and you're trying to replicate those inside of dialogue. I think it can be useful when you've got a return value, because as you say, it's like confirm or close on its own you might declaratively set that, and then it's just I think this is a really important point to make. Like the whole point of command invokers is an anti-JavaScript. We're not against JavaScript. Use JavaScript where it makes sense to use, but I think to do stuff like popover and make that accessible, To do that in JavaScript, it is actually a non-trivial amount of script. So it's nice if we can just offload that to the browser and let the browser handle that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was saying yesterday, I enjoy writing JavaScript, but I really enjoy not having to.
Yeah, exactly. Like dialog.showModal isn't tricky to wire up to a button. But yeah, I think the key thing here is this is kind of, the idea is this is a base. We've got popover, we've got dialog, and we've got custom commands, which we'll come to. But we now have a framework where browsers can say, well, here's a thing that people probably want to do declaratively. And here's a way that we can kind of do this. And it's a way that people will understand. It's like, oh, there's a new command for command invokers, great. Rather than having to do these sort of pop over specific attributes or some of the detailed summary where some people maybe say it's a design mistake, how a summary is so tightly coupled to it. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's just like, there you have a close event listener. It's quite clean. You've got all your logic contained in that one thing. And I think that's a theme that when we come to the custom stuff, you'll see again.
Yeah. Speaking of the custom stuff, I think let's jump over to talk about that. And maybe Luke, do you want to give an intro to the custom event or custom commands? Yeah, we know, or now we've seen this for popover or for dialogues, things targeting those things. What are custom commands and what are they useful for?
Yeah, so essentially we know people are going to go, oh, that's a nice way of doing things, but I want it to do this very specific thing. And some of these specific things might end up being things that actually we want to add to the browser in future. So we were really keen to have these, but we were also really keen to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where authors go, hey, this would be great for this function. Like I want it to call show picker. So I'm going to have show-picker as my command, and then suddenly the browser can't add it.
Right, and
so
some third-party tool adds it, and now it's on half the internet, and there's no going back. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So for the way that command invokers work is if you have a command that's recognized by the browser, or you have one that's prefixed with a double hyphen, which if you write CSS, you'll probably recognize, and that's where we took the naming from. In those cases, it will do something. If you have an invalid command, so if you have foobar with no prefixes, the browser will essentially do nothing. It won't fire the command event at the target, and it obviously won't do like the dialog or popover things. And that is there specifically. So if you write an invalid command, it doesn't do anything. You see that pretty quickly. It means if we want to add foobar in the future, we can, because chances are it's not going to be on half the web. And yeah, so the idea is that you click the button and it will fire a command event at the target that command 4 is set to. And in that command event, you can say, hey, what is the actual command I've been given? So it will say that it's like --, rotate. You get the information of the source of that command event. So you get given the button that's fired at. And that's really handy because then you can do stuff like look at the value attribute, or you can do stuff like look at my data hyphen. Like you can kind of come up with your own API system here and say, I accept this command. If you point to me with this command with these attributes, and then I'll use that information. And I think this is something where people see that and go, well, I can just add a click event listener to the button. And you can, but I think the really key thing here is that the event gets fired at the target, not at the button. And the really nice part of that is if you have, say, a custom element, you can define a single command event listener in your custom element that actually has all of the logic. It can go and do it can access its internal state. It can do all these things, and then you can just kind of document your API surface as being like, I have these commands. If you have a button pointed at me and invoke me, it will do these things. And it means that you don't have to. I found this a lot when at my last job. You ended up writing code. It was like, I want the button to do this thing to this other element, and I've somehow now got to go get access to that other element, which in JavaScript is fairly easy, but if you're using like a component framework like React or Vue, gets tricky, especially if it's in a completely separated tree. I've then got to communicate with that in some way. Maybe I fire an event at it, but maybe actually I call a function I've attached or all these other things. And it ends up either you're duplicating logic, because you might want it invoked from different places, or it gets a bit messy. You have one button that needs knowledge of all these other things that it's going to touch. Whereas this way, like I, as the consumer of this component, don't need to know anything about the internals. It's like the whole point of web components is I can have a closed shadow root and I don't care about it. And I think that's one of the big benefits to this is I can have the command event. All of the logic can be defined in one place. If I want to update that logic as the component, I can just go and update it, push out a new version, and it still keeps on working. I don't need my consumers to go, oh, I've made a mistake there. I need to go and update all of my sites that are using this sort of thing. So yeah, it was one thing I was pretty keen on from like a fairly early stage when we were coming up with this, was like custom commands. It doesn't do much for you. Like it can't handle the accessibility. So that is, once again, that is down to the author to get right, because we just can't know what is correct for what you're doing. But we can say, here's a button, fire this event, go and do these things. And now it's in the platform. It's stuff that people can design around. There's like, here is a way that you can have buttons, fire events at these other things, and fire these commands effectively. So it's declarative. It does still need JavaScript, but it is still declarative. Someone can read through their code and go, I have a button pointed at this element, and it does this command. So I think it does still provide quite a bit of benefit there over just having, as I say, the like click event listener, which would be the alternative.
Yeah, and I feel like there's sort of two parts of the JavaScript, and it gets rid of one of the parts, right? There's the like I have an element that has some JavaScript that can handle an action, and then there's the like when I use it, I have to actually wire it up. That part, and I guess a lot of the custom elements I've created look for buttons that are pointing at them or something, and this sort of removes that step of the element have to go looking, or the button having to go look for the element, or whichever way you wire that up. This is very cool. I like how immediately this is either replacing or simplifying every custom element I've built recently, since mostly what I'm doing is like controlling attributes and properties on places, and very cool. I'm excited.
Yeah. And I think one of the other benefits to it being declarative is like I don't actually need to know much information. I can just like have this button. All I need is an ID. And even that, strictly speaking, you don't need, because using JavaScript, if you set the button's command for element property, you can just give it an element reference and it will work. So if that element has an ID, then the attribute will be updated to use the ID. But if the element itself doesn't have an ID, or it's in like a shadow tree or somewhere where the ID isn't accessible, then the attribute will appear as if it's just an empty string, but it is actually internally linked with this other element. Which again, if you've got like frameworks where you've got JavaScript running, you can still do some of this stuff. And then you start to solve some of these like cross-route problems. It's like quite famously difficult to interact with web components across routes. there's some stuff being done for ARIA, and this effectively uses the same mechanics. So I'm not sure what the browser support is for the ARIA side of things, but popover and command both piggyback off that work effectively to be able to do some cross-route stuff. And if we get reference target, or whatever it ends up being called, the declarative kind of forwarding of references across routes, this just kind of works automatically. Again, because it's using the same like ID reference system, it essentially gets that for free. So then you really do start to get web components being able to work declaratively quite nicely. Yeah.
Let's dive into an example. This is, I think, somewhat of a contrived example, as they all are, I guess. But here, what we're going to do is we're just going to hook these buttons up. We have 3 buttons: make blue, pink, and orange, and we're going to target, basically change the back or the color of our H1 here, because that's what we have on the page, and any element can be the listener for these events. Actually does, okay, great. We can do multi-edit on CodePen. So we just add command for, and I'll need to add that ID. And then the command we need to start it with a double dash, so that we know that it's custom and it's valid. And we're going to call it colorify. And then the other part is we're going to set a value, and we're going to cheat a little bit, and I have some colors imported in a style sheet, and just we'll pull those in. So there we'll have the different colors set on the value. We're saying the command is for the H1. The command is colorify. So then all we need to do is add the a ID there. So that's the HTML part. So what's the can you walk me through the JavaScript part?
Yeah. So if you depending on how messy you want your JavaScript to be, but you can do h1.onCommand using some of the fun things that browsers have. So I think it's a lowercase c.
Okay.
I've never seen onCommand. Is onCommand a new part of this?
Yeah. So the way event listeners work is, generally speaking, if there's a new event added that gets fired on elements, that the element will get a property like on the event name, and then you can just set that to a function effectively, and it will execute.
Okay. And so you can also do that with on click or yeah.
Generally speaking, it works for most events. There are some edge cases, but yeah.
Okay, so and that's an assignment. We're assigning the function to that. Okay.
Yes.
So just do that with an arrow function, and then then what do we need to do inside the event body?
So you can do like if event.command equals and then the name of your custom event. So this time it's colorify. Then you can go in there. You can get the value. So you do event.source.value, and that will get you your var effectively.
Okay.
So you can use that where you want to use it. So this will probably be like event.target. Yeah, exactly.
Style.color equals. I think okay. So then we'll set this the target. So the event target is the H1. We'll set the style.color to the value from the source. So in theory, if we can make this blue, okay, or pink, or orange, and it works.
That was too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can make it nice. You can do the like query by ID and add event listener for command. And then, but what you begin to see here is you have one event listener, and you can go and add a new function, which is, I don't know, size. So add a new custom command, which is -- size, and it can, using the value, it can set the size of the font size, for example. And you can have that co-located all within this one function.
Right. Can you also then add something that's going to happen on a built-in function? So say we're opening a dialog or show modal, I guess it would be, and we do something in addition to what the browser is doing there.
Yeah, exactly. So you can both prevent default, the built-in. So if you do show modal and or maybe an example here is you have the close thing on a dialog and you actually want to stop that from happening in this specific case. You can call prevent default in the event. For custom commands, nothing happens by default. That's like an API guarantee, but for the built-in ones, as I say, it will only fire these events if it's a custom command or it's a recognized one. And yeah, so you can make it so that when you close a dialog, it goes and does some other thing. Maybe it fires a fetch somewhere. And yeah, so it's the same kind of API surface. Just in those cases, the command would be, as you say, like show -modal or something like that.
That's cool. Yeah, and I think in this case, I mean, it's somewhat contrived in that we're targeting just, you know, an H1, but I'm definitely thinking of all the custom elements where, you know, you can have or you can fire some random or some, I guess, some predefined command at a custom element, and that custom element knows what to do with it internally, and that, you know, that could be any number of, it could be loading from an API, it could be, you know, doing all sorts of work under the hood, but you don't need to know, the button itself doesn't need to know any of that. It just farms that out to the to that custom element.
Yeah. Well, since one of my favorite things to do on the web is give users control over the styles, this isn't contrived at all. This is like straight up my alley.
Yeah. And I like that you can get the source and the target. I think that's very handy, because that way you can potentially do different logic depending on where it comes from potentially, or
So that's actually, there's two kind of reasons why the source exists there. One of them is so you can do this sort of like come up with your own API kind of design. You can access the attributes, or as you say, you can check, does it have this ID? Is it this specific button, or maybe you're using a class or something like that. And the other reason is like it's fairly vital if you want to set ARIA attributes in response to something. Like if you are making some sort of custom expander and you want to go and set ARIA expanded, where you need to know the button you need to go and set that on. Yeah, so that's one of the key bits there, is giving you access to that event.source, and it will do the right thing in situations where that does, like where that's coming across kind of shadow routes, and it will, all of that gets handled for you by the browser. So we're not introducing any weirdness. It is also a composed event. So currently it does cross the shadow route boundary. If you effectively fire it into a custom element, it does get kind of sent back out again. There's some discussion going on at the moment as to whether that's desirable, but currently it is composed. It doesn't bubble, but you can do capturing. So that's one thing I've actually got. I basically just kind of attach a command event to my like HTML element effectively, and I can just in there handle all of the things I want to handle. Which means that like I can really locate all my logic in this one place, and based on the target and based on the source, I can decide to do all these various things. And you can do that just by setting capture true in the event listener effectively.
Okay, so let me see if I understood that correctly. So you're saying that you can on your event listener, you can add that to the HTML element like that, or some top listener, and that you'll be able to listen to all the custom commands.
Even if they're not targeting the wrapper, the HTML.
So it doesn't work if you do .on command, but if you do .add event listener, they've got options in there, and one of them is capture. If you set capture to true,
okay,
I think capture is the correct one. If you set capture to true, it effectively makes it so the event bubbles up to where you want to go, and you can do things to control that. But yeah, it means that you can. So like one example is like if you want to polyfill a new command. Like it will be hyphen prefixed, but if you want to polyfill it, you can make something. You add an event listener to HTML, you capture it. If it's that command, then you can go and do the right thing in all these cases, and you don't need to add an event listener to all of the possible targets. So that's one of the key use cases there. So one of the things that we'll discuss is some of the like what are the future commands that we might add.
Yeah, that's actually.
I like even that it's a feature that polyfills itself.
Yeah.
Down the road. That's interesting.
Yeah. You mentioned future things that are coming down the road potentially. There's a great list of on OpenUI that future things that invokers might be able to do that would be built into the browser. Do you want to let's see if I can make this a bit bigger. Are there any that you want to highlight or go through?
Yeah, so the request close is an interesting one. So recently a new function got added to dialog. It's the one at the top of the list, I think. Yeah, so you can call dialog.request close, and that's in Safari and I think Chrome as well. And that is like close, except it will also fire the cancel event, which previously only ever got fired if you pressed escape. But we've been making various improvements to dialog. So there's a new closed by attribute that got added recently, so you can do stuff like light dismiss, or you can disable light dismiss and the escape key handling. But we also added a request close function. And the idea there is because that fires the cancel event as well as the close event, you can kind of locate lots of your logic in this cancel event to do lots of your decision making. Like it's quite a common use case where you'll have a dialogue and you want to say, hey, are you sure you want to close this? You've got like a form that's half filled out. And to be able to do that, you need to listen to the cancel event. Previously, that only ever worked for the like built-in browser methods. There was no like JavaScript way to do that nicely. So you had to handle it in the cancel event and also handle it in your other custom logic. So the idea is that some of this will let you like, again, have one event listener that handles the stuff it needs to handle. So request close is one that is in Chrome Canary, and that's coming down the road at some point, hopefully. And then, so yeah, there's a few ideas we have in here. Like, I don't know if it's in this list, but one of them is like a copy to clipboard button. This is something I thought of probably about a year and a half ago. It kind of struck me as like, this is quite a common pattern that you'll have a button you hit and it will do something, like it will copy text from a text area, for example. And I thought, well, we have command and we have the ability to target another element, so maybe we can do copy to clipboard. And again, there's something that's come up again recently is someone's like, oh, maybe command invokers can do this. And there's still questions. Like clipboard handling of like rich HTML isn't super interoperable right now. So it might be that we do like a copy text only initially. But yeah, there's some questions to answer. Like it's quite common with a copy to clipboard button that you'll have like a small copy for like 3 seconds and then that will go away and reset itself. And currently there's no way to do that nicely with like just a button press. Or at least not that my CSS skills could come up with. I was having a look at doing like transitions based on the active state and stuff like that, and it somewhat works, but isn't quite there. So I think both the visual feedback and also the accessibility feedback for like that copy to clipboard is probably the big question there. But that's hopefully something that we can look into and kind of get, because that's such a common pattern.
Yeah,
It would be nice to,
yeah. I don't know how many times I've written the logic of click button, add event listener, or add a set a timeout to remove a class at the end, and worrying about like, okay, has this been clicked again in the interim? What do I do? All those things. But yeah, it would be really useful to be able to have some sort of was just pressed or something, some pseudo class like that. Although, as I was thinking about this, I'm not sure. I mean, this is somewhat of a unique pattern. There's not very many cases where you're not changing anything in the DOM, or like you're getting a side effect essentially. You're triggering a side effect that doesn't. You want to know about it temporarily. And that's
it's an interesting pattern, because as you say, it's not super, like it's not I click a button and a popover opens, so it's like a thing has happened. But there is still, like, you do still want to feedback that, hey, I've clicked the button and it has done the thing. I think like share is another one that's on the list, as like we have the web share API. Maybe it makes sense if we can have that declaratively. And some of the others that we've kind of like been thinking is like, hey, we have an input type number and it has like a step up and a step down function. And like form controls are notoriously hard to style. And that is something that's being addressed. Like CSS forms as a spec is in its very early days, but it's coming out to try and address some of this. So it may be that some of the commands don't end up happening because like the built-ins get good enough that we don't need them. But these are the ideas that we've come up with of like, these are built-in functions. We maybe want a way that people can make buttons that do them, and kind of what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, I see also on the list there's like the audio and video controls, and I mean, that's a sort of place where the built-ins are great, but also there's a lot of situations where you want to control them from outside somewhere. And I think that gets at what you were sharing there of what Curtis was saying in the comments. The detailed summary, it's pretty stylable. It's getting more stylable, but you still have to have the summary inside of the details. And this toggle command would let you move that outside. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So actually, that's one I do want to kind of touch on. There is that was one of the very early ones, and it kind of almost made it onto our list of we should do this for V1. But details have some historical baggage to them, especially from the accessibility perspective, where it may be that we don't want that. It may be that detail summary is what it is, and actually what we probably want is another primitive of just, here's some content and it can open and close, and there's no accessibility semantics associated with it. It is just, we have a collapsible thing.
And that's the openable.
And that's the openable idea. The name is a placeholder, to be very clear. So yeah, it's one of the things with specifications. It's notoriously hard to name things. We just pick a bad name and we fix it later. And the idea there was, that's an attribute you add to an element, and it gets some of the behavior of details summary, but it means that you can use it in places where detail summary doesn't make sense.
Right, you can use different semantics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like you might have a table row that you want to expand and collapse. One of the other things is like the hamburger buttons that expand something on your page, where it being detail summary doesn't make sense. You just want a button that's ARIA expanded, and then this thing that can open and close. So that's maybe we go for that and we don't end up doing the details, or maybe we get both of them. If we have this thing, then we can say when details is correct, this is what you can do, or when you want this other thing, you get this other thing. So there's discussions to be had around all of these, but yeah, hopefully we end up getting some more of these down the road. Yeah.
We had a comment. I think we've maybe covered this, but Curtis was wondering about details, toggle command for details, and it looks like that is one of the options, which is great.
Yeah.
If that, or one of the potential options there. Yeah.
And then so there's a few others. I think there's probably some that we've discussed at some point that never even made it onto this list yet. Like the copy one I've only just added recently.
Mm-hmm.
Show picker as an example. Like I have a file input and I want a custom button for it. Being able to, because it's quite common. You have like maybe you have a button and all it's got in it is like a little like a paperclip icon. And quite a common approach there is you have that button, you click it, and then you call .click or .show picker on a file input that's like hidden, or it's effectively hidden, moved off screen or something along those lines. And it'd be nice if you didn't need to do that kind of. Well, it'd be nice if you didn't need JavaScript to do that. And it'd be nice if you didn't really need lots of these things. So yeah, like the show picker. Like it works for file input, but it could also work for color input or date pickers and all these other things where like we have the JavaScript to do it, and it'd be nice if we had a declarative way.
Yeah, for sure. This is all really exciting, and yeah, I think it's a great it's a testament to a good API when it opens up more possibilities that kind of fit into the same semantics without kind of ruling out, well, we can't do this because it doesn't, we would need, we don't want to add a picker to target attribute or all of these different things needing their own custom attributes, but having them as commands, that I think that really works well. What other are there other and are commands that, or what I guess maybe is the next thing that you might be working on around invokers?
So I guess there's two other things. One of them is like command invokers work when you click a button. It's very like or do the keyboard equivalents. But it's a fairly common pattern on the web and in other applications that maybe you like hover over something and it shows a popover. So something that, again, this was proposed basically as an immediate follow-up to command invokers, was maybe we need some like hover kind of trigger. And the thinking there is in flux, but the idea is that currently the proposal is interest target. It will probably end up being renamed, but interest target. And the idea is that interest is like an input agnostic kind of concept for like hover, maybe focus for keyboard, or maybe like a hotkey. Touch screens, there's lots of questions around how they should work, but maybe it's like long press on touch. Like if you've got a link on touch, you can like long press it and you get the context menu. Maybe there's some way we can replace or work with that to have a custom kind of pop up there. And that would effectively build on this kind of command invoker stuff, but have a declarative way to do that, which I think would be quite nice. So there's a lot of complexity around that to get that right, and if we could have that baked into the platform as just like a single attribute or two single attributes sort of thing, I think that would be really nice. I don't know if it will happen. There's a lot of questions, and maybe the kind of design overall isn't like ready yet for the platform to bake it in.
This might
go ahead.
raise even more questions, but have you looked at like on input or on change for inputs?
Yeah. So like the interest invoker, like originally I think it's buttons and links.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two things it will work on, and like the area element. And there's immediately the question of like, should this work on other things? I think again the idea is to try and be conservative at first and kind of do the bits we know, and then we can maybe look into like maybe inputs where you have like the picker that shows up, and you want it on the whole input rather than just the like button that you add. But yeah, as you say, there's other kind of events that you might want to trigger popovers in, and maybe if we don't do interest invokers, we can come up with something else where it's like, I want to trigger this popover on this event, and I can do that declaratively. Because as you say, like the different kind of design systems go with different approaches, so it'd be interesting to see kind of what happens there.
Yeah, I'm thinking too about things like wiring up an input to an output, right? And if I could put an on change command on the input, and have my my custom command set the value of the output, or you know, actually control a color from a color picker, or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, we've got declarative click now, like where can we go from here? And yeah, there's a lot of interesting thoughts on that. Like one of the other things is like maybe you want something to happen when focus changes. Some kind of design patterns like tabs, some tab lists, if you use the arrow keys to move on to a new tab, it immediately navigates you there, and how do we go about doing that? Yeah, there's lots of questions, which is why we were like, we wanted to get like popover dialogue and the custom ones kind of out the door, and then we can start building on it. Because then with custom commands, people can start trying things out and going, hey, I think this should be built in, and come and propose it to us.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. Yeah, and I think one thing to note is it's in, or it's out in Chrome, or commands in general are out in Chrome. They're in nightly in Firefox, I think behind a switch, and then Safari is in TP Technical Preview. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
So it's available without a flag in Safari Tech Preview.
Okay.
It's shipped in Chrome. It's slightly further behind in Firefox. There is an implementation behind a flag, but it is slightly behind the latest spec. So that's the last piece that needs updating effectively.
Yeah, and then there is a polyfill from Keith, who's the Keith Circle, who's the other spec writer on this, I think. So if you want to start using it, you can. That's for sure. But yeah, you might want to think through what makes sense for your setup and that kind of thing. But definitely, it's been fun to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one caveat I will add to the polyfill is it doesn't handle all of the accessibility for you.
Okay.
So if you use it, that is something where it's important to point out, like ARIA expanded and that sort of stuff, you will still need to handle even for the built-ins on the browsers that don't support it. And that's just because there's a fair amount of complexity to that. I think we can add it, but it's just not in the polyfill right now.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thanks. Is there anything either of you would like to add on invokers or anything else?
I mean, I think I'll just give a shout out to OpenUI as a community group. I think I'm quite keen on more people getting into web standards, and community groups are a great part to that. So for those that don't know, like CSS is done in a working group, and to some extent, to take part in that, you need to be a member of the W3C, which has costs associated. Community groups are open to anyone, so you still need to join them, but it's completely free. And OpenUI has been really welcoming. So I started there probably about a year before I started like properly working on web browsers. Because I was doing like design system stuff in my last job, was doing the UI aspect, and there was many OpenUI proposals I was interested in. Some of them have progressed, like Popover was a big one. Some of them haven't so much, but it's really welcoming to anyone to join. If you're interested in UI, I do recommend coming along.
Yeah,
And even if you don't want to join the calls, you can raise issues in GitHub and take part that way.
Yeah, and a lot of good features have progressed out of there. I mean, a lot of the stylable form controls stuff is coming from there. The invokers, there's
I think the big ones Popover came from there. Customizable select has had obviously much wider input from CSS and what WG for the HTML side, but originally like OpenUI has been doing lots of the work behind that, and Chromium were prototyping that a lot through there, and then Command Invokers is the kind of latest one to come out. I recently added to the OpenUI site, there's like a graduated proposal section, so you can kind of see a list of maybe some of the ones that have come from there and come out. Because I think it's important to kind of point out like these came from here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and it's a very friendly group. I've joined some of the calls, and they're also the home for the global design system that Brad Frost is talking about or working towards. And so I know that that's something you're interested in. There's some RFCs around a badge component and some other components that they're working towards. So there's a lot of things going on with OpenUI, and it's been really fascinating to see group work. It's a fun group of people who are. It's been fun to watch all the different aspects of these parts of invokers, and accessibility is always coming up, which is a really great thing as well. Thanks for reminding us about OpenUI. Well, Luke, is there anything you want to promote, or where can people find more from you?
So I'm on Blue Sky and on Mastodon. Blue Sky, my handle is lukewarlow.dev, and Mastodon, I am lukew@toot.wales. Hopefully I've got that correct. And so I post on there a fair amount. I'm sure most of it's not interesting. Some of it will be, hopefully. And then, they're where I post on mostly.
Great, thanks. And Miriam, anything you'd like to promote?
Oh, we've got a CSS workshop coming up. Your browser window is over top of that image. CSS workshop on layouts specifically, 3-day workshop coming up at the end of the month. Layouts.
And you know what? My fear that I would switch over to that and everyone would get muted was true. So if you want to say that again, I'm sorry.
No worries. Tech is fun. Workshop on CSS layouts, 3 days at the end of the month, coming up soon, but tickets are still available. And we'll go in depth on everything from Flexbox and Grid to container queries and normal flow. Everybody gets very excited about normal flow, right? We'll make sure we understand it.
Great. Yeah, and if you are in need of a custom web app, get in touch. You can hire us to make a custom web app that makes the web a better place. And you can visit oddbird.net/wingingit to access links and resources mentioned on today's show. On the next Winging It next month, you will join us for a live Q&A, so that should be exciting. And if you'd like to support us, please like and subscribe. And if you want more from Oddbird, we invite you to check out our newsletter at oddbird.net/oddnews. We have a lot of really exciting things coming, so definitely check that out. So thank you. And remember, best practice is a conversation. So let's keep talking.
See you all.